Some say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, those people are wusses. Revenge is best served flamin' hot and covered in spiders. Yep, it's time for more dastardly tales of fiendish vengeance. So, from some truly impressive uses of dog doo-doo to a group of thugs made homeless and destitute, here are some more extreme stories of revenge that went way too far. Rocket-powered. I asked you guys to send in your own terrible tales of vengeance, and boy did ya. Take this one, sent in by a fan we'll call DM. Back in South Carolina in 1998, when he was in high school, DM's girlfriend ditched him for another guy. Let's call him Chad. Now, DM knew Chad. He lived in the same apartment complex. Also, he knew that Chad drove a Camaro that he loved more than life itself. So, heartbroken and enraged, DM thought up a gnarly way of getting back at him. He began by setting an animal trap in the dumpster of a local Chinese restaurant. Then, he waited. About a week later, he'd caught 2 huge, smelly raccoons. It had worked. Now, our hero needed to act fast and snagged himself a vehicle entry kit from the auto shop he worked at. Around 1 a.m. that night, when all was silent, our guy snuck down to the complex's parking lot. After grabbing the caged raccoons and locating Chad's car, DM used the entry kit to pop open the lock and proceeded to drop the 2 supersized animals inside. Then he quickly shut them in and snuck back to bed. The next morning, Chad woke up to a supremely nasty surprise. His precious Camaro was utterly ruined. The raccoons had spent the entire night fighting, pooping, peeing, and tearing up the inside of his beloved vehicle. Staring down who knows how much in repair costs and completely unable to get the stench of raccoon dookie out of the interior, Chad was forced to scrap his darling car. I hope he enjoyed taking the bus. I'm sure DM enjoyed watching him. Pranks a lot. I love a good prank as much as the next guy, but there are limits, people. Something Redditor Tremendo the Great apparently doesn't understand. Sometime in the 2010s, Tremendo was trying to work, but kept relentlessly getting prank called by his pal Mike. Hey, if it was a prank war Mike wanted, then it was a prank war he'd get. But rather than drag out the fighting, Tremendo decided to finish things with a single move. Knowing Mike was enjoying the single life right now, he got to work gathering free legal documents online. Income disclosure, visitation schedules, statements of parental rights. Yep, Tremendo was going to serve Mike paternity papers and convince him he was a dad. After filling them out and crafting an emotional cover letter from the phony mother, an Irish exchange student named Eliza, it was time. Now, Mike was a popular local bartender, and Tremendo wanted to amp up the carnage to 11. So he enlisted another friend, one Mike had never met, and instructed him to deliver the documents at 10 p.m. on Saturday night, when the place was guaranteed to be packed. He also let Mike's boss know what was going to happen, trusting him to play along. When the time came, Tremendo hid away from the bar, so his laughter wouldn't give anything away. Then his pal approached, coldly served Mike the paternity documents, and left. Cue 10 minutes of absolute terror as Mike ran around the place like a headless chicken. He poured himself several drinks to try and calm his nerves before dashing to his boss and begging him for advice. After a long conversation that probably centered around responsibility, his boss finally relented. A huge smirk formed on his face as he told Mike to take a closer look at the final page of the documents. There, in minuscule size 2 font, was the phrase, "Go frick yourself, Mike." Mike's face twisted into a strange mix of relief and anger, and he ran over to Tremendo, who was in hysterics, before thwacking him hard in the chest. But it was a small price to pay for Tremendo. The prank war was over as swiftly as it had begun. Now, if you don't want me to enact my righteous revenge, you should really drop a like and subscribe to my channel. That's your only warning. And if you have a revenge story you're itching to tell, shoot me an email at revenge@beamazed.com. You could make it into the next episode. Firing a coworker. Lunchtime is sacred. If someone interrupts me and my can of Campbell's SpaghettiOs, it's beatdown time. Clearly, Redditor Detroit Yeah Dude agrees. See, back in 2015, while working a job in a big factory, he fell afoul of a lunch thief. And they weren't just a one-off criminal. Whoever it was, they raided his lunch from the fridge for an entire week straight. Safe to say, Detroit was ticked off. Now, like I said, this factory was big. Couple that with the fact that dozens of temps regularly came and went, it would be nearly impossible to track down the culprit. So Detroit had a better idea. If the jerk wanted his lunch so bad, they could have it, but they certainly wouldn't be enjoying it. That night, he carefully crafted the tastiest-looking fajitas you could imagine, then made them completely unsuitable for human consumption. The secret ingredient was in the salsa, as well as the usual tomato, onion, etc. Detroit minced up an unholy amount of Carolina Reaper peppers, once known as the hottest in the world. But on the face of it, the booby-trapped lunch looked delicious. The next morning, Detroit arrived at work, popped his creation in the fridge, and got busy. Sure enough, within just an hour, a blood-curdling scream echoed over from the lunchroom. Bingo. Detroit followed the cries for help to discover a man lying on the floor gasping for air with worried people all around him. It turns out the intense heat from the fajitas had induced a severe asthma attack in the lunchbox bandit, and he had to be rushed straight to the hospital. He ended up fine, but remember kids, crime doesn't pay, but you will if you mess with somebody's grub. Scumbag stepmom. Ever since Cinderella, stepmoms around the world have suffered a bad rep. Sometimes that rep is fully deserved, though, like in the case of Reddit user Young Sour Swedes. After his mom passed away at just 55, his depressed and lonely dad married Grace, a Machiavellian character 15 years his junior that was clearly, at least a Swede, only after his dad's dough. See, dear old dad was a successful investment banker, so he was quite the prospect to a gold digger. However, their marriage wasn't to last. Sadly, though perhaps not to Grace, Swede's father passed on not long after they'd tied the knot. Predictably, he left a huge sum of money to Grace, but he left the family home to Swede, and she couldn't stand that. Several months later, Grace was already dating somebody new, Ivan, and both were staying in the family home. You know, the home Swede owned now. Although you wouldn't think of it from the way Grace and Ivan acted like they owned the place. Swede didn't like them one bit, but he put up with their arrogance and entitlement out of respect for his dad. Well, one day, our guy returned home to some bad news. Grace had given away his PlayStation 4 to her new man's cousin because she'd decided Swede was too old to be playing video games anyway. That was the last straw. Soon after, Grace dropped the news that she and Ivan would be leaving the country for a short while to get married, and asked Swede to watch the house. Yes, his own house. Rather than act offended, Swede simply smiled and agreed. Now was his chance. As soon as the cretinous couple left, he got to work. Swede hired movers to take all of Grace's possessions and place them in rental storage. Next, he changed all the locks and started advertising. He was leasing the place. Swede was quickly inundated with inquiries and settled on a nice young family to become his tenants. When Grace returned to find the locks changed and a family she didn't know living there, she was furious. But after kicking up an almighty fuss about losing her home, Swede's lawyers were quick to remind the self-entitled gold digger that the house legally belonged to him, And just like that, Grace and Ivan were officially homeless. What a wedding present. I hope they enjoyed the honeymoon. A slideshow shock. There's nothing more satisfying than people getting publicly shamed for being unfaithful to their partners. At least, if you're channel fan Ayat. Ayat's friend Josiah was married to a woman named Mercy. Josiah and Mercy seemed blissfully happy, and everything was sunshine and roses. And that was until Ayat spotted Mercy at a party cheating on Josiah with a guy named Payman. Like a good friend, our guy snapped photos of the misdeed and went straight to his pal's house to tell him. Naturally, Josiah was heartbroken. What was he supposed to do now? He and Mercy had already planned a huge anniversary party, and it was only 6 weeks away. But Josiah saw an opportunity. 78 people would be attending the shindig, so instead of canceling it, he was going to give them a party to remember. To begin, Josiah let some of his closest friends know about the infidelity and encouraged them to take incriminating photos of Mercy and Payman whenever they caught them in the act. Over the next 6 weeks, they did exactly that. Well, the day of the party finally arrived, and Mercy was excited to start showing off a romantic slideshow of her and Josiah to all 78 guests. But when the slideshow started, her face dropped. There, on the screen in front of her family and friends, Josiah was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were photos and videos of her cheating on her husband with Payman. She begged Josiah to stop the show, but no dice. Meanwhile, the guests sat in utter shock. When the ordeal was over, Josiah regaled the whole tale of betrayal to everyone before shoving divorce papers in his soon-to-be ex-wife's hands and leaving. His final words to her were simple: "Don't ever say my name again with your disgusting and toxic mouth." Sheesh, that's brutal. Pooper Soaker 9000. Prepare yourself for a stinky fan submission from Jeff, whose mom was having a bit of trouble with a rude neighbor when he was 8. This neighbor, Scott, had parked his huge motorhome right outside of Jeff's house. Annoyed, Mom gave him a piece of her mind, and he eventually agreed to move it. All solved, right? Well, no. See, a few days later, Scott moved the motorhome right back. Irritated, Jeff's mom approached him again, but this time, he wasn't cooperating at all. Instead, he flung swears and insults at her and outright refused to move it off her property. If that wasn't bad enough, he started throwing his trash all over the yard too. And that was it. Mom wasn't going to take it anymore. It was a boiling hot summer, and the heat gave her an idea. On top of everything else, Scott's dog had been crapping all over the lawn. Obviously, he hadn't picked it up, so Jeff's mom walked around the yard collecting the brown butt nuggets and dropped them in a container. Then, like some sort of poop witch leering over a cauldron of doo-doo, she poured water in and stirred it all together with a maniacal grin. Eventually, the concoction became a grotesque brown liquid, or forbidden chocolate milk, as Jeff put it. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Mom picked up her son's squirt gun, filled it with the rancid goo, and started blasting all over Scott's motorhome. She didn't stop until the whole thing was covered in poopy water. Remember, it was a super hot summer too, meaning the poopy paint cooked hard in the sun. Enter the mega stink. All that heat hadn't just set the poopy mixture, it also made it absolutely pong. Toxic fumes filled the air as Jeff and his mom fled into the house. The next morning, Scott walked over and was beside himself with rage. His once beautiful motorhome looked like it had been squeezed out of the BFG's backside. Without a word, he pulled the poopy door open and drove away in a rage. Jeff and his mom never saw him again. Some say Scott's still driving around the USA, desperately seeking a way to get rid of the horrid smell. Debt destruction. What would you do if the love of your life had a degenerative health condition and you knew that one day they'd wind up in a wheelchair? Well, if you're anything like this now deleted Redditor, who we'll call Walt, you'd commit to supporting them. Unfortunately, Walt was in for the shock of his life. See, his fiancée, who we'll call Anna, had told Walt about the future that awaited her. But Walt embraced it. In fact, he planned to build the two of them a wheelchair-accessible home using his construction business. In the meantime, Walt began doing work on Anna's current home. He invested over $30,000 of landscaping and construction into the place, running everything through his construction business to increase the value for when they eventually sold it and moved in together. Everything seemed to be on the right track, but then the worst happened. Out of nowhere, he began to feel ill. After going to the doctor, he was diagnosed with cancer. Man, Anna stepped up, just as Walt intended to do when her condition worsened. She helped Walt around the house, took him to chemo appointments, and generally offered support. But when Walt suggested they put her house on the market and move in together, she suddenly stopped seeing him and became increasingly distant. Then the bomb dropped. She was breaking up with Walt because she couldn't see herself looking after someone long term. Let me just reiterate this. She dumped her seriously ill fiancé because she didn't want to look after him, despite being seriously ill herself and knowing she'd need a partner to look after her one day, something Walt was more than willing to do. Oh, and did I mention, it was by text. Shattered, Walt forced himself to accept the situation and drove to Anna's to drop her things off. But when he got there, he saw something that made the situation even worse. Anna and a longtime friend were getting intimate on the couch. Man, what a piece of work. He left her belongings by the door and left, but later discovered she'd been having an affair with that friend for a long time before breaking up with him. This couldn't stand. 9 months later, Walt had finished chemotherapy and was on the mend, feeling much better. While going through some paperwork, he discovered the invoices detailing all the work he'd done on Anna's house. He'd spent a total of $32,680. Walt was owed all that money plus interest, and he was gonna get it. So he got his lawyer involved, and Anna had no choice but to pay up. She was selling her home at the time, but even so was left with barely anything after settling her mortgage and paying Walt his dues. Strapped for cash, Anna was forced to move in with her daughter. How embarrassing. But that's not all. A few years later, Walt, now cancer-free and thriving, bumped into Anna. She was haggard, wheelchair-bound, and desperate to get back together with him. Walt, on the other hand, was having none of it. He calmly responded by saying no. He just couldn't see himself looking after someone long-term. Small world. Don't tick someone off in a tight-knit community. You'll never be treated the same way again. Redditor A Quiet Borderline knows this all too well, as she recounted a story told to her by her late father. See, Daddy Dearest lived in a booming city in the U.S.'s Rust Belt region, where almost everyone there was destined to work at the local car plant. Remember that for later. One day, Dad found out that his good friend George had been jumped by some local thugs and was in a seriously bad way. He survived, but was forced to retire early and go on disability. Now, George's dad, Walter, was a World War II veteran and no-nonsense tough guy. So when he discovered the identities of the three attackers, Flynn, Mac, and Zeno, he wasn't going to let them get off scot-free. Walter called some of his buddies who were also disgusted at the trio, and together they started spreading the truth about the assault. It didn't take long before everyone in town was talking about it. The three culprits all worked at the car plant, and when staff there heard the news, they were ticked off. Slowly, they began giving them terrible shifts, stealing their tools, and generally making their working life hell. After a year of this, all three quit in sheer frustration. So far, so good. What's more, the three unemployed scumbags quickly found that nobody in town would hire them thanks to the awful reputation they'd earned. With no job and dwindling cash, they swiftly became homeless. But that wasn't all. For the rest of their sorry lives, Walter and his friends kept an eye on them, and whenever they seemed to get close to getting a job, they'd start up a rumor mill again and scupper their chances. As far as A Quiet Borderline knows, they never got out of their predicament. I bet they never forgot what they did to poor old George either. Drunken distress. Like a lot of people, I enjoy a tipple every now and again, but if you take it too far, you'll end up suffering big time. Ellen from Sweden knew this and weaponized it. When she and her friend Lynn were teenagers, they were having a girls' night together, drinking at Lynn's place. Before long, Lynn wanted to invite Ben, Ellen's ex. Ellen was reluctant, as she still had feelings for Ben and knew Lynn had a crush on him, but eventually agreed, on the condition the two girls would sleep together without Ben. What could possibly go wrong? Turns out, a lot. After Ben arrived, Lynn quickly gave up on her promise and, after a big argument, kicked Ellen out of the room, bringing Ben in instead. That's rough. As Ellen left, however, she noticed how drunk Lynn seemed. Vengeance on her mind, she encouraged her to have a few more drinks and went downstairs. Almost immediately, Ben called Ellen back up to help. Lynn had puked all over the floor. She was clearly far too drunk, so Ellen was tasked with getting her some water in an attempt to sober her up. But our heroine wasn't done yet. Instead of water, she handed her so-called friend a glass filled with straight vodka before running off and leaving the two lovebirds alone. Safe to say, the rest of the night she heard Lynn blowing chunks and Ben stressing out about it. It must have been like calming white noise. Don't bug me. If you have a problem with creepy crawlies like I do, this story from a fan named Olivia is sure to make you itch. So, Olivia had just discovered that her live-in partner had cheated on her. Not only that, but she also found out he'd been mistreating her two cats. The cheating was bad enough, but hurting her fuzzy friends too? That's where she drew the line. So, just before she moved out of their place forever, she left her ex some parting gifts, a couple of potted plants. Only inside the soil, she'd buried spider and fly eggs. Ooh boy. Olivia heard later that after she left, her ex stopped having company over and was complaining about a bug problem. Well, she knew exactly what that was. The creepy crawly hellscape she'd turned the house into. Yeesh. Hats off. Redditor Curly Girly found out that for the final 2 years of her marriage, her husband had been cheating on her with one of her friends. Understandably, she was crushed. But even after the couple divorced, their lives remained awkwardly entangled. For one, they still shared ownership of a car which they were forced to take turns with. One time, when it was Curly's turn, the car came with a bonus. A hat had been accidentally left inside, one that she instantly recognized. It belonged to her old friend, the very same one that her ex had cheated on her with. As she stared at the traitor's headwear, a devilish idea crept into her mind. Curly grabbed a Q-tip and ran outside to her dog's freshly dropped dookie. I'm sure you can see where this is going. She delicately poked it into the poop, withdrew the brown smear stick, and spread it all around the inside rim of the hat. Then she carefully placed it back where she found it. The next time she got a turn with the car, she noticed the horrid hat was gone. Her ex-friend had clearly taken the bait. Man, I can only imagine the look on her face when she felt that dog doo-doo rubbing against her forehead. Hey, act like a poopy head, become a poopy head. You've got mail. I'm sure your grandpa is pretty cool, but I doubt he's as cool as this next one. A fan that goes by Bugs had a granddad with a problem. Some young neighborhood punks had made a habit out of messing with his mailbox, bashing it, setting it on fire, even yanking it clean off with their truck. But our hero wasn't one to take this lying down. Oh no. After repairing it countless times, Gramps decided enough was enough and came up with the perfect vengeance. One day, the old man wrapped super strong bulletproof metal around his mailbox post and concealed it behind a layer of wood. That night, he popped on a ghillie suit, lay in the grass nearby, and waited for the kids to show up. Sure enough, the teens arrived right on cue and went straight for the mailbox, wrapping it in a chain and attaching it to the rear bumper of their truck. But things weren't gonna go the way they expected. This time, when they floored it, the mailbox didn't come with them. It stayed rock solid, and their rear bumper was ripped clean off instead. And because these punks were flooring it, they went flying off the road and straight into some nearby trees, totaling the vehicle. The teens all emerged unscathed, but their wallets sure didn't. According to Bugs, it cost around $50,000 for them to fully repair the truck. Jeez. Okay, Bugs, admit it. Your Gramps was in the Secret Service, wasn't he? Doggone. Some revenge stories are so crazy, so psychotic, they can only ever be admitted to while drunk off your ass. When Redditor Angry Inky Owl was at a party back in his first year of college, he found himself chatting with a girl we'll call Pam, and she had such a story. See, the girl had a cat. This little kitty was her best pal, and she loved it dearly. But one day, her feline friend got out and came across the neighbor's aggressive, poorly trained dog. Heartbreakingly, it didn't survive the encounter. Distraught, Pam confronted her neighbor, but unbelievably, he blamed her. He was known for being super defensive of his dog and angrily claimed that Pam was at fault for allowing her cat to leave the house. Well, with no money to pursue legal action, she was forced to accept the loss and move on. Only joking. She did the complete opposite. One night, she blended ground meat with weed killer, stuffed it in a hen's carcass, and launched the toxic treat over the neighbor's fence. You can guess what happened next. The next day, the neighbor came round screaming that Pam was responsible for his dog's demise, but she denied everything. After all, how could he possibly prove it? Sure enough, she got away with it and never told a soul. Until Owl, of course, who decided to keep a safe distance from her for the rest of his time in college. Good call, I'd say. You're in trouble. It often feels like the only way to deal with bullies is to take matters into your own hands. One British fan of the channel called Mark took this to the extreme. You see, back in high school, Mark was the victim of a particularly persistent bully. We'll call him Bob. Every day, Bob would demand Mark give him his drink, usually a bottle of cola, or else he'd get a beating. At the end of his rope and tired of Bob's bullying, Mark returned home from school one day and asked his family for some advice. His uncle laughed and told him that he should empty half of his drink away and fill it back up with pee. It was clearly a joke, but Mark wasn't laughing. Next day, he asked for 2 drinks, one to keep and one for Bob to steal. Then he poured half the cola out of one of them, topped it back up with his own personal brand. Sure enough, back at school, Bob the bully stomped over and demanded his soda. Mark happily obliged, handing over the tainted bottle and struggling to contain his laughter as the brute guzzled it down. He didn't guzzle it down for long. After realizing how awful it tasted, Bob spat out the foul liquid in disgust. What's worse, he passed the bottle around for all his friends to try, wondering if they could figure out what was wrong with it. Holy cow. Needless to say, after that, Bob never hassled Mark again. And on that grotesque note, I've had my fill of extreme revenge for one day. Which of these stories did you find the craziest? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.